My name is Barry Cranford. I'm the founder of this group, the Fractional Consultant Community. So I've recently set it up as a way to bring together fractionals and look at some of the common challenges people face across all the various different disciplines and markets that fractionals work in. So one of those areas that's come up a few times is around coaching. So we've had a few questions about coaches. We've obviously got a few coaches in the group as well. I've had various conversations with various people about the benefits of coaching, but we thought we'd do a session for everyone in the group just to speak to a couple of people that have had coaching, look at how it's impacted their careers and what it might do for other fractionals. So we're joined today with Alex and Frank. Alex, do you mind just saying a few words about yourself, just an introduction?
Not in the slightest. Thank you, Barry. Hello. For those who've not met me, I'm Alex, and I'm working in the fractional data space, although I'm currently transitioning out of a full-time position into that area. So I'm relatively new to it. I'm delighted to be here talking to you today about the coach that I found and the difference that it's making to me and how it's helping me move forward with my personal and professional goals.
Brilliant.
Frank?
Thanks, Alex. Frank?
Cool. Thank you, Barry. Thank you, everyone. So my name's Frank. I've been interim CTO rather than fractional for about 4 years now. And before that, I was a perm CIO, CTO for about 10 years or so at various content, data, media organizations.
Brilliant. Thanks, both of you. Okay, so let's start at the beginning then. So obviously, there's a lot of stuff on LinkedIn about coaches. You see coaches mentioned all over the place. But can you just give us a very brief introduction then, how you see what a coach is, why you might get one, and what did you think you were getting before you signed up for one? I'll go for Alex first, that question.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Well, for me, I found myself in a position where I have experience of working in either executive or executive adjacent roles. I don't always have the broadest experience of that because I come from a primarily data and tech background. I was having a lot of challenges communicating and aligning with people outside of that experience. And so the opportunity really came up more than me going out to market and looking for someone. Somebody said, I've met you, I really like you, I'd like to work with you in this capacity because I think there's something there that I can help bring out. And what they've done for me is give me a sort of safe, non-judgmental environment where I can take the kind of challenges and problems that I'm dealing with and help me work through those in a sort of questioning way so that I'm coming up with those solutions and I'm developing the skill sets that I need and the approaches that I need that work for me. So that's sort of where it is. And it's different to me, therefore, than something like a mentoring experience, because this person is a professional executive coach, I think, is one of the services they provide, but they work with many, many different executives. Some of a more senior grade than me, some of a more junior grade, some of a sort of peering grade, broadly in the same sorts of industries. So they help me triangulate and say, well, I've seen this over here, and this is how this person's thought about that, or this is what's happening over here, and this is what that person's done. But they can also challenge me and push me on some things that maybe I haven't thought about holistically. Frank?
Thanks, Alex. Very, very similar. But so Barry asked, what is a coach and why do you want one, or why do you have one? So that definition, I find it helpful to think around a kind of simplified spectrum from a mentor who maybe provides guidance and advice based on experience, an advisor who maybe focuses down and gives direct advice on a specific topic, and then a coach who can maybe have aspects of all of those, but ultimately the purpose of the coach is trying to improve performance of a specific area. I don't think it's a hard and fast separation. I think you can flex up and down on that based on your needs. But in terms of what is a coach, I think it's much more around focusing around helping improve in a certain area rather than necessarily directly say, do it like this, do it like that. So the main reason why I explored having a coach was when you start out as a fractional or an interim, the kind of work you do is the easy bit. You've made the decision to go, hey, I'm not too bad at this. People seem to like what I do. But then you accidentally discover that you're running a business of one. Now you have to do accounting. Now you have to do marketing, sales, and to some degree, HR on employee well-being through that process. And I've definitely been guilty of devoting a lot of time to the clients, doing the work, because obviously that's what we enjoy. So being in the business rather than ignoring working on the business. And I felt I needed some help around working on the business side and also providing that accountability partner. It's not necessarily that I didn't know what to do, but it's focusing and getting it done and prioritizing it above doing the work. And I think the benefits that I saw was helping that focus, providing that accountability, but also new insight in how to focus on and run that business aspect of being a fractional learning team.
Brilliant. Thanks both. Alex, that's super interesting. So someone actually pitched you, I'd like to work with you and I think I could help you and get more out of you, or how you said that. Were you like, yeah, perfect, that sounds great? Or was it a case of, wait a minute, what are you selling? You know, what are your rates? Or what were you thinking in those first early days there?
It was very much the latter, because I'd met this person through a work relationship and they were providing services to the business in a particular area. And that's how we met. And so over the course of about, I would say 4, maybe 1.5 hour conversations, we were sort of gently poking around at what is it actually that you want? What are the challenges that you have? Where would you like to improve? And can I help you do that? Are you even open to being pushed and challenged in these areas? And so that was, you know, really my qualifying process for this was finding out, is this person aligned? And it was really critical to me to find someone who was sort of culturally aligned with me in terms of, you know, how I think about people, how I think about relationships, how I think about sort of inclusivity when I'm working in different organizations. So that really kind of framed part of my assessment criteria, a really big component of that. But I also thought it was really crucial that the person that I found to help me was getting, not only had a backlog and a wealth of experience of their own that they were bringing and sharing with me, which is really, really welcome, and gives them a lot of credibility. It's also the fact that they were working with and are working with, you know, CEOs, CIOs, CDOs and things across the UK, and are able to say, look, you know, I understand maybe not the technicalities of what we're dealing with, but I understand some of the issues that are happening, some of the things that other people are facing, and, you know, I can help you think about why your experience of them might be different to other people's, and then how we might turn that around into, you know, things that you can change and improve about your own approach.
Okay. Okay. And also I'm going to just go into to Frank then. So very different, Alex, just to confirm then you met somebody came to you and then it was a case of, are you right? But you didn't benchmark them against other people. They were just like, the connection was there. So you were happy straight away, right?
Well, not straight away, but that's effectively it. I didn't have to sort of go to market and sort of cold interview people.
Yeah. Understood. Okay, great. You met somebody and then you worked until you found the connection. The connection was there and then you were like, yes, perfect. And that's great because, like, speaking from experience, going to market and screening coaches, it's a very difficult thing. And it's hard to know quickly where the chemistry is and that kind of thing, or at least in my experience, it was. Frank, you obviously have a contrasting experience to that where you did, I believe, look at a variety of different coaches and before you selected the right one. Can you talk on that at all, to how you made those decisions? who was right and wrong and how quickly you knew?
Absolutely. So I was going in with a specific ask or what I felt was a specific need, someone to help me with the business side, lead generation, networking, that type of stuff. So that's what I was screening for. So how I did that was lined up a few introductory sessions with potential coaches, and kind of had a sort of pseudo half hello, how are you, and sort of semi coaching session just to see how it would work. And I would say for all the individual coaches that I screened, I could see me working with them in the future at some point in time based on specific needs. There was one more focused, let's say, the kind of traditional exec coach, one kind of more around kind of relationships and understanding. So each of them had their different strengths. So it wasn't a case of that's a good coach, that's a bad coach. It was much more around which one's kind of aligning with my needs today and can help me with what I think is the gaps I have today, and can tease some of that out, and is maybe bringing a little bit more experience, maybe having run a business, as well as the coaching side. So that was more the kind of tactical screening. Did they kind of tick those boxes? And then very similar to Alex in terms of what I went through, but kind of in reverse. It's about it. Is there a fit? Is there a kind of interaction or chemistry, for want of a better word, between you and the coach, that you could feel you could have an honest conversation and they could give you critical feedback in that kind of safe environment? But right, it takes a lot of work, and it's not necessarily you probably get that instant first impression rapport, and then it's about sort of validating, does that continue to be true? But I'm not sure there really is another way to do it other than spending time and having some of those sessions and see what's working and see what's not. It's not a marriage in that sense. You're not making a lifetime commitment. So you can engage for that short term and see if it works and extend it, or to commit to a certain point of time. So it does take work. But it's not the end of the world if it turns out that it's not working or it's not gelling. But sometimes it's a little bit more trial and error than a perfect, here's a set of criteria, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, you're the one.
Yeah, interesting. And really interesting point there, different coaches for different points. I've heard that before. Last time I screened a bunch of coaches, I didn't find any that I actually wanted to work with, funny enough. Rather than seeing different people you could work with at different times, I was just a series of no's. But also actually in doing that screening, I met one of the coaches that I thought would be actually a really good fit for somebody else. Interesting.
And I ended up referring them as part of that screening process, and they've ended up having a great relationship with that individual over the last while. Wow,
that is interesting. And yeah, I think it's a great thing that that can come out of it. And do you know what? I think there is a kind of case where also you picked up there on the words safe. You had to meet with somebody where there was chemistry, where you could connect with and you could feel safe. And I think that's so important, that you've got to be able to get vulnerable with someone for that coach to actually be able to help. And so to be able to be vulnerable, you've got to be with somebody you can feel safe opening up to. I think my problem was when I spoke to coaches, I was like vulnerable, then straight away and like, oh, I don't know, I get all very, very difficult kind of thing. I found it, at least in interviewing different ones. So yeah, okay, interesting stuff. Okay, so the big bit now that I really want to move on to is, what has it been like? How have they helped you? Any specific cases here? Because I imagine there's going to be a lot of people that are going to watch this afterwards that are going to be either aspiring fractionals, new fractionals, maybe fractionals that are kind of struggling with particular parts, maybe people that are feeling lost and starting to question various parts, and probably a lot of people that do need a coach. Obviously, coaching is extremely expensive against other services. And so there's going to be reluctance, especially if people have never worked with one before. So I think it's one of the most useful things we can do today is kind of get some examples of how have they helped, and hence hopefully people can see themselves in you guys and see why they might want to consider one. So Alex, if it's okay again to start with you, any particular examples that you're happy to share of how things have helped you, how coaching's helped you?
I've got many examples, so we can probably go backwards and forwards a fair bit. But I think one of the first things that we discussed, and this didn't necessarily come from me originally as a talking point, it was really the kind of the fire that started things, was, is going into a fractional role the right thing for me? Because I was sort of on the fence about it at the beginning, thinking, well, do I want to go in that direction? Do I not? And we spent, I would say, several hours dissecting that, pulling it apart, bringing in different evidence, trying different things, thinking about how do we test different hypotheses, what's the evidence we want to use. And that's really been like the feedback and the conversation and the self-learning that has come out of that conversation for me has been a really great education and a driver for how I want my career to progress, how I want my personal relationships and my professional relationships to progress. And we've thought a lot about things like brand. So to Frank's point earlier about lead generation, the person who coaches me, my coach, really, I met them through things like brand marketing and comms, interestingly enough. And so we've spent a lot of time working on that, thinking about, are we exploring, well, what are the questions that I have around that? What is my personal brand? What are my different qualities that I want to take to market? What differentiates me? How do we pull that apart? What are the different challenges that I've experienced around that? And so that's been a really exciting component as well. So thinking about what can I do to articulate my value proposition, etc., and shape it. And then I think around, Frank's mentioned something around working on the business as well. We've spent a lot of time working on things like customer experience, essentially. So what is it like? How do you want someone to feel when they work with you? How does that distinguish you in the fractional market, say? And you can do all this in a totally safe, non-judgmental space. You can say things that you wouldn't be able to say in front of other people. I would probably struggle saying in front of some of the people here. And I certainly wouldn't be able to talk about them with customers or potential customers for fear of kind of damaging my credibility there. But to have someone there who understands the fractional market and is asking me questions about that and how I want to be, it's really kind of pushed me to think about this in new directions, new ways of thinking. And it's, very helpful in all those areas.
Great, thanks, Alex. Frank, anything you'd add to that as well?
Yeah, so I was going in with a specific ask around how can you help me run my business better? So I wasn't looking for a coach around how to be a better CTO, how to specifically engage. Oh, it's not inseparable. So just with an eye on Mark's questions, I wasn't looking for someone that had been a CTO. I was looking for someone that could help me in the coaching role, but maybe had been a business owner or run a business of one or slightly bigger. So I think I was looking for that experience as well as coaching for my specific need. And then some of the stuff in terms of, was it successful? What did we do? I think we started off thinking about what was my ideal week? What does that look like? The kind of aspirations and goals and visions and where do you want to get to and that kind of stuff. But practically, what's a working week look like? And then that sort of moved on to then, who's that ideal client? Is there a specific space? Because as a CTO, it can be a very, very broad spectrum, or we could have a narrow kind of niche. And just working through that, is it broad generalist or narrow and niche or somewhere in the middle. And then just trying to narrow that down to a manageable kind of target market, to throw in some business jargon. And focusing on that. And then from that point, thinking, Ryan, who's the competition? If we go in this space, what are others doing? And then how are they advertising themselves? Where are they networking? What are they talking about? So a little bit of kind of competitor analysis in the loosest sense, but more to learn rather than go head to head. And then an interesting aspect was, okay, is there anyone else in that space that aren't CTOs, aren't direct competitors? How do they play in that space? How do they present themselves? How do they position themselves? And is there anything we can learn of just how to be in that particular business space or business domain? And then moving on, I mentioned previously about lead generation. So much more deliberate around networking, much more conscious into why and when and where that should happen. And as a result of that, starting to build that deal pipeline or that flow. Whoever spoke to why, what's the outcome? Am I managing that? And is that converting to anything? So those are the kind of highlights of the kind of focus and direction based on my need.
Interesting. So I think the kind of the common area there from what you're both saying is the questions, like both going sort of asking different questions about where you're at, but just, and again, that's what I found from my experience, coaches seem to just always have the right questions to ask to take you a level deeper into your thinking. And I remember a particular session where a coach just asked them, why is that, about 8 or 9 times, one after another. And it's interesting to get a bit deeper. Have you guys ever been surprised at where the answers you've given to a coach? Either of you has ever sort of led to things where you're like, oh, that was interesting.
Well, we're getting onto emotions now, so that's a hard topic. I'm not surprised. But maybe frustration, going, yeah, that's right. You didn't need to tell me that. Yeah, so not necessarily surprised, but sort of reluctant acceptance. And yeah, okay, I really should do that.
I've got a couple of things. So just popping back on the previous question for a moment. 2 of the things that have really changed for me as a consequence of meeting with a coach on a regular basis is your point, Barry, around questions. It's shaped how I ask questions, and a very, very large component of my role in organizations is asking good questions. And I've learned a huge amount from working with somebody who asks interesting, challenging, probing, occasionally, I'm trying to think of an exciting word here, incendiary questions that make you think, that, where you are accountable to yourself for giving an answer. And I think that's, and then following that answer through with evidence and showing, if we implement what you, Alex, think is the right answer, what happens? What do you learn? And the second part is the time input, the time commitment that I am making, and my coach is selling to me, if you like. We meet on a regular basis, almost every week, for usually between an hour and a couple of hours. And that is that's forced me in a way to kind of carve out a little piece of my week so that I'm not available to customers, for example, in that time, unless it's important, crucial, on fire, in which case I'll move my coaching meeting. But I think it's really, because of that regular commitment and that regular accountability and regular check-in with another person, forcing me to be accountable to myself, if you like, that's really accelerated the process. So I wouldn't kind of put that down. I've got away from what the original question was now. Help.
Were you surprised by anything that you've
That's right. So one of the very first things that we talked about was aspirations around leading an organization, whether I wanted to lead a business, lead an organization, or be a fractional, be an independent person. And my coach has been a business owner. They've run a successful business. They've exited a couple of times. Now they're doing 2 or 3 different, concerns of their own, one of which is around, coaching. And, my sort of questions around, do I want to be a fractional? Is that the right choice for me? What does that mean? When we explored it, when we started to really dig into that, they said, oh, it actually sounds, Alex, like what you're really looking for here is culture. You're really looking for the right kind of culture. And that's what you're looking to achieve with this culture, how you run your own life, the freedom around that, how you interact with customers, the ability to own that on a very personal level, and have a different set of terms around what your input to the organization looks like, how you are measured, what value you are providing. And that was really quite influential on me, and really quite a profound thought.
Amazing. Okay, brilliant. Right, Mark, sorry, I've been ignoring you up to this point. I'm going to jump back to your questions. I can see that there's been a few put in there. So I'm just going to go through.
Oh no, don't worry. I mean, I was waiting until the end, right? So I'm just kind of bookmarking my questions for when you actually open up the Q&A session.
No, that's cool. That's cool. Let's go for that now. I've got a few other ones, but we'll jump into these. Given you've put a few, did you have one that was like the most interesting question there? I see you've got the first one was around, do you think that a coach should have had the CXO position before so they can draw on their past experience? Is that a good place to start?
Yeah, so let me preface. I'm going to turn on my camera for a second. You can see I haven't shaved, so that's why I had my camera off. Yeah, the reason why I'm saying this, and so so first of all, let me just preface this by saying that I'm a little bit skeptical of the whole coaching thing, and the reason why I say this, and I think I've said this publicly before, is that I've been CTO and chief architect for some major companies and, of course, a whole bunch of startups, but it's especially the challenges in the major companies with politics and all that gives you, as a CTO, the most challenges. So I always like to say, okay, I was walking, back in the days when trader behavior was a lot more dicey in financial institutions. You walk across the trading floor and all of a sudden the trader who's angry that his trading system is not working hurls a garbage can at you. So, that's the kind of stuff where, yeah, you have to live that stuff in order to kind of get the kind of experience that somebody would have to help you by kind of living through that stuff. So I know that there's lots and lots of examples out there where, like, you have acting coaches, somebody who was not a Broadway star could successfully coach an actor, or sports coaches. Yeah, this is kind of for me, because I've lived through all of these different experiences. How would a coach be able to coach you successfully if that coach has not walked in your footsteps? So let me start off there.
I chip in. I'm sure there's various people in the audience that can answer that. I think first of all, it's understanding the definition of a coach. I talked at the start. I think that there's a spectrum from mentor, advisor to coach. So in the extreme end of coaching, I think that's around asking open-ended questions. So it's not bringing experience or advice, or you should do this or you should do that, but it's the view that you have the answer, I just have to help you get it out. All the way through the other spectrum of, I've done this before, I've been there, done it, this is what you should do in that scenario. So if you're looking for the advice, then of course someone that's been there, done that, understands the context. If they give you advice, you would at least assume they know what they're talking about, versus a coach that can maybe just help you work through those scenarios and understand those questions and how you would respond, versus the kind of direct advice. So it's around that spectrum and where you're sort of placing yourself and your expectations around that spectrum.
Yes, I would say so too, in that taking the example of sort of politics and the headaches that causes and how it is, the major pain point in all organizations. The way that I work with the coach on specific sort of interpersonal relationship things in politics is I'm articulating to them, this is the position as I see it. This is my understanding of what's happening. This is how I know these people. This is what I suspect they're thinking or doing or their motivations. And what that person can do for me is just really challenge that and say, well, why do you think that? Have they really given you any evidence about that? Or are you just, stuck in your own head hypothesizing? What questions could you ask them that are going to unlock, really their core meanings? And some of them, really surprised me that I'd never thought about before. My coach said to me once, well, do you think this person's behaving in this way, because they want to impress their boss? Because they just want a pat on the head? And it turns out that was the issue. And I just never thought of asking that sort of question about somebody before. And so they don't necessarily, to Frank's point, they don't necessarily say, this is what you should do, because I'm not really looking for them to solutionize either, and they don't want to do that. What we want to do is think with clarity and a little bit of objectivity and distance about, this is what you think you've observed. Have you tested that? Go and validate it. What's the approach going to be? And maybe even start to think about, right, Alex, what's your preferred approach, and how are you going to execute that?
Can I dive in, Barry? I'm not quite sure how this works, whether it's that kind of hands up or system. So
go for it, Chris. Go for it.
So Mark, I agree with you to an extent, which is that some people really won't benefit from coaching. They don't want it. They can get all the answers themselves or from existing sources. And though I don't like it because it's bad for business, I absolutely accept it. I would say, based on my experience, that the majority of people do benefit from coaching and would do so, not least because there's this old saying that I remember from back in the day, 2 heads are better than 1. And I genuinely think that if one of those heads is able to take an objective perspective, so is outside, in this case, your world, what you may see as a disadvantage, I actually see as an advantage, not least because they can ask the simple, the perhaps obvious, the almost embarrassing questions that someone closer to you wouldn't like to or wouldn't dare ask or wouldn't think of asking. So there are people, as I say, who can resolve their own problems themselves. I absolutely used to think that myself. And actually, a bit of a confession, I used to think it was a bit of a weakness if I had to ask other people's assistance. But I've kind of got through that. I have 2 coaches myself, and I'm a firm advocate for coaching. Absolutely, I'd welcome the views of the other coaches on the panel on this.
And it's worth saying that after Chris mentioned he's got 2 coaches, Chris is my coach. So, but in saying that, hopefully I've been very, very honest in my feedback and experiences.
What I would say, though, is it's important to, I wouldn't be a data person if I wasn't advocating for this, but it's important to measure the impact that it's having. And, when you walk out of the coaching conversation, are you actually applying the sort of decisions or the plans that you've agreed with yourself in that session? If you are, what's the outcome? Because I've done things that I never thought I would do, because we thought, hey, here's an idea. Have you thought about approaching the problem this way? Shoot from 3 points. And it has had fantastic results. And I really love that, because it's really helped me challenge my view of myself, look at myself from other people's perspectives, think about different things, give me a lot of confidence. And I think that's really important. And if you're not doing that, if you're not measuring it, and you're not trying it, and I think you've got to look very seriously at, is this the right coach? Is even coaching the right option right now? But you have to measure it.
Right. So Barry, if you'll permit me, I just want to riff on something right here. So I did put a question about what is the success criteria of a coach, and how do you know when you've been the coach is successful or when the coach is not helping you? But I just want to kind of dovetail that into what you just said, Alex, because being a data person, you do look for objective results, and it was very curious to me that you said that you needed a coach for your fractional business. Now, I've been doing the fractional CTO work since 2018. I took a year off to be a real life CTO for a big company, and I've come back to it over the past few months. But in the fractional CTO world, I find things a lot less involved and a little more cookie cutterish. What do I mean by that? You meet a startup founder, somebody has an idea, right? As a fractional CTO, and I'm differentiating between an interim CTO, where you might go into a larger company and take over for a while because the CTO left, and a fractional CTO, where you're probably working with a startup founder, and it's just you and the startup founder, and he has or she has an idea, and your mission is, let's go find, let's do the architecture, let's find the development team, let's set up the cloud, let's get the business requirements all set, let's run the development meetings, let's get you a product. So you're not, as a fractional, you're not involved in the corporate politics that you're used to in a big company. You're not involved with pleasing some boss. You don't really care about missing out on your annual bonus, because there is no annual bonus, right? So I would think that you would need a coach a lot more if you were a full-time CTO, especially in a larger organization, than a fractional CTO, where your work is kind of like more, you're following a recipe for getting a product out the door. So how, where do you see a coach coming into play in a fractional capacity, and what are the objective measures you're using for the success? Has your fractional coach enabled you to get more leads, to win more contracts? So I'd like to kind of have your answers for that.
If I can jump in there first, Alex. So I didn't take a coach to be a better CTO. I took a coach to help me run the business of being an interim CTO. And I think that applies for fractional as well. That there's, what is the need? And is there a coach that matches that need? That might not be the day-to-day of doing the work of the fractional versus running the business versus whatever else, certain aspect or certain minutiae of capability. What that has helped me do is kind of understand how to position myself in the market, to do the deliberate networking, conscious networking, build up that pipeline, understand who my buyers were from a point of view. It's not other CTOs and other peers, it's CEOs, CEOs, that how do I network with them, how do I get in front of them, how do I understand their needs, how do I talk their language. So based on my specific ask around or need around building that business, delivering that, building the lead, putting myself out there, ultimately getting the next client, I achieved that. So was it successful? Yes, I got my next client as a result of all of those things building up over time. And I'm more confident now that I can continue that and build that up to get the next client and the next client, and how to position myself. So in that example, I think that's how a coach can help a fractional CTO not necessarily be a better fractional CTO, but be a better business or business owner.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Frank, around distinguishing quote unquote, being a better CTO from actually working on the business that you want to create for yourself. I would say a part of it for me is, even if I'm not embedded in an organization, Mark, I'm usually still navigating politics to some extent. I'm oftentimes managing a team or a group of resources within the organization, or at least I'm helping them on a journey somewhere. And data is all about change, and change is all about taking people on that journey, and there's a lot of politics involved in that always. But a lot of it was thinking about communication, and a lot of it was thinking about how do I communicate with other executives and influence them. A lot of it was about how do I measure the impact that I'm having in the organization, whether that's at the leadership level or broadly across the organization or in the team. So how would we measure all of those things effectively? How many days am I having where I'm spending all my time dealing with a challenging client? Or how many days am I having where I come out with a smiley face? Things like that make an impact. The more material things like how many leads am I generating? How many conversions am I getting? I can measure that, but to Frank's point, that's not necessarily why I've gone to this person for the coaching, because I wouldn't have access to this kind of coaching relationship if I hadn't found this person. Being by myself, if you like, in a fractional capacity, I've got no one to go to other than my kind of peer network and so on. But this is a person who's dedicated for me with their sort of background and their experience. So that's where it sort of helps me in that capacity.
Thank you for that.
That help. Any other questions, Mark? I know you've had a few others on there, but I think we sort of covered
No,
some of them in there.
I don't. I don't want to make this all about Mark Adler's questions, which I tend to do, right? So please.
No, it's quite interesting because we've got someone that's skeptical. We've got a fractional that's skeptical about coaching. We've got two people that've had coaching, and we've got one of their coaches here and a few other fractional CTOs. So it's an interesting bunch of people. So I would say your views probably represent those of many others that might be watching afterwards. So if you do have any other questions, then obviously love to hear them. But if not, then one thing that I would be interested to ask is, based on what you've been through, Frank and Alex, what recommendations would you have? So let's say that now people have been converted. We are now thinking about, someone is now thinking about getting a coach. What would be their first steps towards getting one? How would they kind of set themselves up for succeeding in connecting with the right coach? Any thoughts or advice based on what you've been through for that?
Yeah, so I think it's meet them, have the conversation. Even those early conversations with a select group that you're trying to narrow down can help you clarify what you think your needs are. In some cases, you might not know, but you think you might need help, and a coach can explore that further and tease that out. Or you might have a very specific ask that you're looking for help on. So understand what is the challenge you need help with, and then just have those conversations with those select few and see what lands, see what doesn't.
Can I just, sorry, Alex, I'll ask in a second, but just on that. So did you find, Frank, that you were able to, in the discussions that you were having, clarify more about, how did you put it there, what challenge you need help with, and clarify your needs? Did you find through the conversations with the wrong coaches that you were able to get to zero in on what those were?
Yes, I think you have it in your head, and as you try and articulate it and have a conversation around it, you can describe that need better and snappier, and definitely that, even just that exploratory conversation, you can kind of codify and define what your ask is, and absolutely you can identify, or I felt pretty quickly talking to the other coaches whether they could help with that or not. So I don't want to frame it in terms of bad coaches, good coaches, or wrong coaches, right coaches. It's for that specific need. I felt there was ones that could help for that need much better than other ones.
Brilliant. Thanks, Frank. And Alex, anything else that you'd recommend to set people up for success here?
Well, I would underline that the most important thing, I believe, is to have clarity around what your initial consultation and coaching needs to be about, what the outcome to be achieved is. And I think, to Frank's point, if by poking it in different directions helps you achieve that clarity, fantastic. I think in my case, I was probably very fortunate that actually the person who approached me helped me get that clarity very quickly. And that was probably one of the big factors in thinking, yes, I can work with this person. This is really going to help me move forward in what I'm trying to achieve. But I think people have to be really open and as transparent and open as possible in those sessions. Be prepared to find yourself at fault, probably more often than you would like, and willing to take steps, to formulate a response yourself, and take that out into the world and try it, and then measure whether or not it's successful. But also, don't try and overcook it. Each session, I usually take just one big problem in to coach through, and that's it. And we work through one thing. Maybe every session, maybe it takes a couple of sessions to work through that one thing. Maybe we'll come back and revisit it in a few weeks if we've measured something and we want to, reassess. But I don't sort of throw 10 different matters into the same conversation. Just helps me be clear about what I'm trying to achieve in that conversation.
My suggestion when it comes to choosing a coach, because sometimes that's a clever question I get from people thinking about coaching, is that it's head and heart. That the head bit is the coach professionally qualified? Have they been doing it a long time? Probably, do they have practical experience themselves, maybe run a company or been senior somewhere? And do they have the social proof? These days, that's really important, particularly, dare I say it, for younger people, are the stacks of relevant testimonials. So those things are the head. But then the heart is, for me, equally important, and it works both ways, frankly, is the chemistry and the fit. Do I want to work with this person? Do I genuinely think I can help them? Or should I be, referring them on to someone better suited? So, that would be my answer to this question. It's head and heart, and they're equally important.
Brilliant. Thanks for that, everyone. Chris, just then on that, is there anything that you'd recommend in terms of getting the most out of sessions? Like, obviously, you're coming with a slightly different perspective from Frank and Alex on this, but having worked with a bunch of different clients in the past, is there anything where you think you see people doing the wrong thing and you think they might have got more out of sessions if they'd have approached them slightly differently, or have you found some clients where you've had massive wins with because they've operated a bit differently from other people, or anything like that? Like, how to actually get the most out of the individual sessions? Any thoughts there?
Great question. I think the overarching answer is to be open. Stereotypically, Brits find that difficult. Stereotypically further, British men find it difficult. And going further, dare I say, older British men find that difficult. And that's kind of a challenge immediately. It can be. So then it's about, I think someone alluded to this earlier, kind of building a safe, creative space where people can share stuff. One way I approach that when appropriate is, for me, coaching is a team sport. I'm kind of in it together and I'm kind of all in. So I share stuff, partly because I am increasingly open as a person, but partly, it kind of gives someone else kind of an example to kind of being open. So I think that's quite helpful. So for me, that's the key, really. I think what's really hard, and it's not happened to me very often, luckily, is coaching people who don't want to be there, people who don't want to be coached. And most commonly, that's when they've been told to be there. So like they work in a company, maybe they've had a performance review, someone said, you need coaching, that will sort you out. So they're sitting in front of me and they're usually easy to spot because when they sit, they're like this. So if they've got everything crossed, then you're in deep trouble. If they've got their arms crossed, you're in slight trouble, because
That's me. That's me. You described me to a T.
well, I wasn't going to add that, Mark. I was going to leave that for you to jump in. You would be a great challenge to coach. I would love that. You'll be on my wish list.
Coach the uncoachable.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah. I do get people who come to me and say, "You're never going to be able to help me. I'm completely uncoachable," or "I've had coaching before and it's never worked." That is certainly something to think about. That can be a challenge.
Brilliant. Thank you. Well, guys, we're closing in.
It's funny. I'm sorry, Barry.
No, I was going to say, unless anyone's got any other questions or thoughts or anything to ask, then I think we'll leave it there. But Mark, did you have any other final questions?
No, it's fascinating because, coach, I think CTO coach or executive, in what we're talking about here is kind of relatively new. I mean, I've never, when I was back in with the larger companies, I could have definitely benefited from a coach, but I didn't even know that such things existed. So it was, so this is, it's this whole interaction I've had with coaches like Chris, or there's another guy who had an AMA on another Slack channel. It's kind of opened my eyes, and yeah, I'm just, thank you for this. This has been really fascinating. I wonder how a coach might have helped me in my career at the larger companies, if the coach would have made things easier, etc. But yeah, this is fascinating. And Chris, if I had been back in the day, if I had heard about you and we had met, I probably would have engaged you.
Thank you. It's interesting what you say there, because actually, genuinely, one of the reasons I'm a coach is because similarly, back in the day, there were several times I can think of, and probably more if I gave it further thought, when I could really have done with a coach. But I don't think they were around, or if they were, I hadn't come across them and wouldn't have known how to access them. Whereas these days, obviously, it's much more prevalent, and most successful people have a coach, it seems.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just saying, Mark, just saying.
It certainly seems like it's coming more and more. So hopefully, hopefully we can get a lot more people thinking this way now. So yeah, brilliant. Well, thank you everyone for joining. Thank you, Alex and Frank, for obviously being interviewed there, and Chris for adding the comments, and Mark for all the questions. Really appreciate that. We'll see you on the next one. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, everybody.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Cheerio. Bye.